Looking at real estate, so we've been saying probably for the last 2 or 3 years that 5 or 10 years down the road that you would not have what was considered Class A office space unless it was certified green. And we're actually starting to see that happen. A premium that people can get for green buildings with respect to rent because there's lower CAM. So we know, again, we're looking at the growth of green basically to double is what a lot of these folks are saying. So 10 to 20% jump in green. And again, larger corporations looking at incorporating green. These are just 2 big ones. I figured most people would know these name brands. And then we have some quotes from these guys saying that tenants understand energy efficiency. So when we look at green as a whole, green is not just energy. That is one component of it. But that's the one component that pretty much everyone understands. Everyone understands lower electric bills. So it's something, again, that translates to the consumer. And then we also are starting to see more and more incentives. I was speaking at the Daytona 500 Speedway last night, and I was on the phone on my way down here this morning. And it was a gentleman that his entire job focuses around helping green businesses get funding to grow. And so we were talking about Bank of America and how Bank of America basically slated $20 billion that will go to help green companies grow. So this is something where you have corporations coming up and saying, we want to help this industry expand. The first really significant thing we've started to see from an owner benefit, because there are very few incentives out there. There's a lot of things starting to be mandated, but of course builders and developers want some incentives. And we see now the Fireman's Fund coming to the plate saying we will offer lower insurance rates if you are a certified green building. In Volusia County, which is where Daytona is, they have an ordinance now that you will get reduced impact fees if you build green and or use WaterStar certification. So if you're a builder and impact fees kind of hit you, now I don't know if the government folks here are twinging because that's like, we need our revenue. And you all kind of clumped over to this side. I'm not sure if that's an indicator of like a side of the brain thing going on. But that's something that the builders and developers are saying, throw us a bone. You know, fast tracking permits at this point in time is not something that they care about. 2-3 years ago, they might have. The permit rebates is another popular thing that counties do. But this is what we're seeing, that they're starting to give reduced impact fees. So just some ideas of how to promote green. And with respect to the driving forces and the trigger for green building. So these are really the latest information on where it's going. This is what they projected to be the drivers in 2008. And one of the drivers being codes and regulations, so government interplay, so to speak. They expected one to be consumer demand. So people who are much more interested and or knowledgeable about green, and one of them being high interest or high energy rates. So those are the top 3, the demand, the government, and energy cost, followed by people trying to differentiate and having better performing structures. The best example of this is, in the state anyway, is green lodging. And we'll go over the information on what has happened with lodging in the state over the last year to year and a half. So we also know that 3.2 billion square feet of construction register with LEED are currently registered with LEED. We know that 100 million to 484 million, and I'll tell you where that number span comes from, that dollar's worth of construction gets registered with the USGBC and the LEED programs every workday. So the span in that number basically comes from whether they look at the street market value or they look at what it's costing to build. So there's a span in the number. It's obviously a huge span. It depends on demographics. But even if it's just 100 million, so to speak, it's 100 million worth registering with LEED every workday. So again, significant growth there. This one's a tongue twister. We know that by 2009, 80% of corporate America expects to be engaged in green 16% of the time. 20% expect to be engaged in green in some way, shape, or form 60% of the time. And by 2010, they're looking at 10% of commercial construction starts being green. So green lodging. So what happened was in 2007, well, the green lodging program started in the late 90s, and it's a DEP program, and it's been around for a while. And up until 2007, there were 13 certified green lodges in the state. So 13 buildings in about 7 years were certified in the state. And this executive order that came across basically said, in the future, any government business will only take place in certified green lodges. So whether we have conferences, we hold meetings, or we stay overnight, you're going to have to be a certified green lodge. So this came out in July, it went into effect this January. So in 2007, what we saw those 13 green lodges grow to 71 certified green lodges. As of right now, there are over 400 that are submitted for certification. So those lodges understand, look, if we don't submit and certify as green lodges, we're not going to get government business. The next thing that we know is I've worked quite a bit with the American Hotel and Lodging Association. And they spend about 80% of their budgets on hotels somehow go to energy. So whether it's electrical energy, gas, coal, you name it, heating and cooling. They also know that energy costs, as an average, have increased about 15% per year, while their profits have only increased 10% per year. So their profits are increasing at a lower rate than energy costs. So they have a very strong driver to increase their efficiency. And then we also know from a consumer standpoint, and these numbers are growing rapidly. We have 34% prefer travel companies that have some sort of green statement, and 11% of consumers making their decisions based off of the environmental consciousness, so to speak, of the destination. So here's an example of government intervention, high energy cost, and consumer demand really driving one industry, specifically lodging in this instance. So, and again, the hotels they're not going for rocket science. They're looking at low-hanging fruit. So here's an example where they spent $11,000. This is mostly for lighting, going to compact fluorescents, and they saved about $60,000 over 2 months. So I don't know if anyone can remember staying in a hotel at this point in time that doesn't have compact fluorescents. So it's pretty common. Most people have caught on to this. And then we have some additional hotels. There's a Sheraton in Hawaii that they invested a significant chunk of money on their HVAC system, $1.4 million. But they, to date, have saved $4.2 million. So that was about 3 years that they've saved. People looking at marketing their homes. Of course, we have people saying, yes, they market their homes as green, over half. And we have 96, almost 97% of folks saying they plan to in the next year. They plan to go green in some way, shape, or form.